2018 is coming to a close, and it shouldn't and wouldn't end without me looking back at all the reviews I did and deciding which one were the worst games that I reviewed this year, as well as the best. Like always, I like to end my year on a positive note, so I'm going to do the worst list first. This year, I didn't just review Switch games, but accessories and services that Nintendo might offer. Any review I did this year is eligible to be on this list, even if the game came out on a previous year. Also, if you think there's a game on here that deserves to be here, it's possible I never reviewed it, or I'll get to it next year. Some of these games were not bad, just worse than the others I reviewed. So don't complain too much of like, whoa, that game wasn't too bad. Well, that's the reason. So with that said, let's get this thing started. Number 10. The Longest 5 Minutes. This one had potential. It was a game that was told all in flashbacks, as you're fighting the final boss and you're thinking back to all the adventures you had getting to that point. It's just too bad since everything was a memory, nothing you really did mattered as it already happened. Getting new equipment, finding items, it didn't matter since it would be gone in the next memory. I like the idea behind this, I just wish it was done better. The level designs were just awful. The levels are pretty generic to look at, but they put in obstructions there just to slow you down. And it makes no sense narratively. Why does this lookout tower have a Pokemon-style game arrows where you have to travel on them? There's like little piece of trash on the ground. Why can't I just step over them? The level designs were basically mazes in the real world, and they were a chore to go through. But at least you can cast a spell to stop encounters for about 2 minutes. Number 9. 60 Seconds. This is actually 2 games. A beginning part where you have to hide in a bomb shelter and grab everything you might need in 60 seconds. That includes family members as well. The controls were awful in this, and it was not even fun for 60 seconds. And then there's the text adventure game in the second part, which was the bulk of the title. It was dull and depended way too much on luck to make it fun to play. You control the dad, and he acts like he just had 4 beers into an NFL game. Let's just say he isn't exactly graceful. The controls of this were terrible. Moving around the house and having him look for items and people was just too clunky. It also didn't help that the rooms in the house and the items that were in the house would not be in the same places, as it changes it up for every new game. So there really isn't a way of getting better at getting supplies, which was disappointing. You're going to need to make sure that you grab cans of soup and water. Those are what you're going to ration out in the days ahead, and they're going to run out fairly quickly. Now you might be saying, oh, I'm sure there's something in the shelter already. It would be insane to own a fallout shelter in your house, but have nothing in it. Other than furniture, it's really not being used at all. It felt like a cheat not to have it stocked up, or at least some items down there. Number 8. Punch-Out! Arcade Edition. I remember enjoying this arcade game when I was playing it in the local food store. However, I guess I forgot about the awful controls because this game has noticeable lag in it and it would misread my button presses. This is an example of a game where the remake on the NES is way better. My main problem with the game is the controls, as it wouldn't always read my button pushes correctly. It wasn't an issue with me incorrectly pushing buttons. It would ignore quite a few of my button pushes, whether it be dodging or punching. I would say about 70% of the time it would work as it was intended, which is really a problem because in a boxing game you need split-second timing. I knew there was a problem with the game when I couldn't even beat Glass Joe. He's the most basic fighter. I did eventually get past him, but really, trying to beat the others with these controls was just too frustrating to play. Number 7. Where are my friends? I spent a little over $1 on this, and I think I overpaid. This is the 3rd game in a row I'm going to say the controls were really bad. They were way too loose, and some of the modes they have you playing were just almost unplayable. Now, some of the games in this were entertaining for a couple minutes, but most of them were tedious and unintuitive. The worst was this dark platforming exploration game. It has you turning on the generators in this fairly large area. I get what they were trying to do, giving us the freedom to go in whatever direction we wanted and exploring this mine. But it wasn't fun, and the controls were too loose. You could increase the light for brief moments to make things a little bit easier to see, but that doesn't help the extremely repetitive gameplay, and at times too unforgiving checkpoints. I ran into bugs and glitches in almost all the different games they had to offer, from pushing me through doors to falling down a hole, and the game would just keep going and going without me dying, since it was an auto-scrolling level. Number 6. The Nintendo Online Service. This is the only service on this list, but it deserves to be here. When I heard they were going to charge for online gaming and cloud saves, I was happy it was fairly cheap. It's just too bad so far it's just been very disappointing. The online service still has bad lag, and this was forgivable when it was free, but not when I have to pay $35 for it. I mean, sure, there's the $20 plan, but most people are going to probably get the $35 one. And the bribe of free NES games, while it is nice, it's just something I doubt I'm ever going to use. Setting up other family members in your online plan is a pain in the ass. I was setting up both of my sons on my family plan, but there was no option to add them on the Switch. You have to go online with your computer or your app, I assume, and then send them an invitation. Then they have to go to their mail and click on a link. And finding where you have to do all this is not easy. It's kind of hidden behind the options. Why isn't this on the Switch itself? Why not an option to just add an account that's currently on the Switch? Have some checkmark boxes that you have to check and make it that simple. It shouldn't be this much of a hassle to add a family member. Number 5. Sports Party. This is one of the most average games I played in a while. It didn't take any risks and it was very simplistic. It's strange that it's so generic since it was made by Ubisoft. Even the most enjoyable game in this small collection, which was golf, is only okay at best. It's too bad Ubisoft put out such a boring game, as they could have done so much better. Skateboarding has you go down a very generic street with oddly no cars. It's like the city made this stretch of land just for skateboarding, which is insane. Talk about a waste of tax dollars. Now before anyone says anything, this whole place is on an island. So I guess it's possible that the guy who made this place for tourists made this insanely lawsuit-friendly area. But you have to wonder what they were thinking. Why not just set up a skate ramp and not some long slaloms that you have to break your neck on? Number 4. Little Dragon's Cafe. This one really had a nice art style to it, but the gameplay itself was repetitive and dull. Everything was just so dragged out. Running the restaurant was tedious, as was exploring the world. Plus at the time they released this, they were asking a very high premium price for what feels like a budget game. It's all about keeping the cafe running, because the two kids decide to. Why are these two kids running a cafe? Just to keep mom's business running? Well, we'll get into her great business in a second. Then other people show up, and they end up working there as well. There was a guy named Billy, who I call Fake Link. He decides to dine and dash, and for his punishment for trying to do this, he's forced to work in the restaurant forever. One of the most annoying things was that when I would get feedback on dishes, and they would show you the complaints that people had about them. In a normal game, this would make sense, as it would help you improve. However, in this game, no one pays for anything. All of the townspeople are running this scam on these kids. I have to imagine the word has gotten out that this cafe will serve you free food. It's the only way to explain the increasing customer counts. Sure, they say our reputation's going up, but really it's everyone wanting to take advantage of two kids whose mom is in a coma. And then they have the balls to complain about anything? Remember Fake Link, who dined and dashed and caused him to work forever for them? So if everything is free, what exactly did he do wrong, other than not knowing about the scam that was going on? Number 3. ShackFoo. I never played the original game. I always heard the infamy behind it, so I was excited to try it. But you know what? I kind of like the off-the-wall crazy story. But it's just too bad the gameplay was a repetitive slog. If it had spent less time throwing wave after wave of forgettable enemies at us and made it more fun to play, this might not be on this list at all. First thing I have to say is, this takes an incredibly long time to load. I think it actually might be longer than Lego City. And that loaded in a big city to play in. This is just a normal platformer. What is taking so long? This takes over 2.5 minutes just to load the game. It's like it's loading assets to the greatest game ever made. Spoiler to this review, no, it's not. This is ridiculous. I mean, I could just sit the whole 2.5 minutes waiting for this loading screen and just talking about the game. There is no reason in the world this needed to take this long. Number 2. Night Trap. This is a remake of another game I never played. I actually own 2 Sega CDs, and it was always one of those titles that I said I would always get around to, but never did. Now that I finally got to play it, I don't understand why anybody really cared enough to re-release this. It's just a memory game. You just need to remember where and when everything is going to happen, and you can beat it fairly easily. It was boring to replay, and nothing in it made any sense. You play as a member of the police. You've hacked into the camera and the trap system in the house, and you need to save the girls who have decided to have a sleepover from the weird gimp-like creatures called the augurs. This house has 8 cameras in it, and a bunch of trapdoors and other things to stop robbers, I guess. I seem to remember hearing this place has the latest security system, which includes traps to gas intruders and traps that send people into an endless void. I would love to see the brochure on that one, explaining how a company will rip up your house and put death traps throughout it. I'm sure there would be some liability issues with this. You would think at a certain point the bodies would be piling up with all the augurs I send down there. Number 1. Carnival Games. This one shouldn't surprise anyone who watched that review. I couldn't hold back my hatred of this remake of a great title. I am one of those people who really enjoyed the original game when it came out for the Wii. It did a great job of replicating the feel of a carnival. This hardly had any games that you would even call a carnival type game, or the games that were carnival type games would be so convoluted that they were not fun to play. This is just a minigame collection where most of the games are locked behind a ticket requirement, which I made my mission to unlock every game, and it took me hours to do it. I doubt most most people will ever bother to do this. And trust me, the lock games are not much better. So I was excited to hear that they were going to make another one for the Switch. I kind of assumed they were just going to port over the Wii games, like Bandai did with Go Vacation, but I couldn't be more wrong. They decided to make a brand new game and said, what if we made a Carnival Game simulator that plays nothing like the actual experience? It's baffling. What the were they thinking? Even when they do try and simulate the games that you might find, they screw it up even more. There are 20 mini-games on here, with most of them being locked. You need tickets to unlock the other games. And sometimes those ticket goals were just nuts. 1,000 tickets to unlock one game? By the way, a game only gives you on average about 1 to 20 tickets per game played, depending on the difficulty. Well, that's my list of the worst games and services I reviewed this year. Up next to end the year, I'm going to share with you the best games that I reviewed this year. I hope everyone out there has a very happy holidays. And I really want to thank you all for watching.